It is Friday, August 9th. Let's talk PlayStation. Alright, let's start it off with that PlayStation Plus reminder. The current month's games are Wipeout Omega Collection and Sniper Elite 4. You have plenty of time to grab these games, but you better go grab them. Now, we'll start off with Gamescom 2019 because it looks like the show is shaping up to be pretty interesting. So, Jeff Keighley already announced that there's going to be a live show starting on the 19th to kind of kick off the event, and a number of publishers are going to be there. He actually announced a list of about 15 publishers that will be present at the show and during the live event, and Sony's on there. And this kind of goes into two things, which is that the news story after this as well. We know that Death Stranding is going to be there, so Kojima's bringing the game. We're possibly going to see new trailer footage, something to that effect, right? We don't know because the show isn't here yet, but the fact that Sony Interactive Entertainment is there means that, well, because Sony's publishing Death Stranding, that's why they're there, but hopefully we'll see something extra as well, like possibly The Last of Us Part 2 footage, or more info on Ghost of Tsushima. You know, it's not too far-fetched to think we need to start seeing a little bit more of these games. We've seen more of Last of Us than Ghost of Tsushima, so you'd have to figure that possibly we could get a little update on how Ghost of Tsushima's doing. Wouldn't hurt to get another Last of Us trailer that possibly has a release date. If it is poised to release in the first half of 2020, maybe within that first quarter, because it's still being targeted around February as a rumor, and that's fine, that's all well and good, but, you know, we still need to get a release date prior to that so we can look forward to that date, right? So at the very least, we know we'll be getting Death Stranding there, but I do hope for a little bit more. Also, you saw on that list Square Enix will be there, and they have confirmed they are bringing Final Fantasy VII Remake as well, so we'll get possibly another extended trailer of gameplay or a different section that we haven't seen before of Midgar. Or, you know, they're going to have gameplay demos out on the show floor probably, so we'll get some nice impressions and things from people that are getting their hands on time with the game, so that's good. They'll also be bringing Avengers as well, so if you want more details on that, keep your eyes peeled. Gamescom is going to run until August 24th, so the live event starts on the 19th. That's Jeff Keighley's thing. We'll see some cool stuff out of that, but we still have plenty of other trade show days where there's interviews, details, gameplay clips, and whatnot. So it seems like this Gamescom is shaping up to be pretty good compared to recent years where the show wasn't just didn't seem nearly as exciting, but that's maybe just how I'm feeling. Now, for our next news story, we're going to go back to Death Stranding, because once again, this game's exclusivity is being brought into question. I'm not sure why people keep talking about this, but anyway, this past week, a lot of people noticed that Death Stranding was removed from Sony's websites in reference of being a PS4 exclusive. So, on the US site, and I believe the Australian site, and possibly other territories as well, but Sony's site lists a bunch of PS4 exclusives, and Death Stranding was previously on there, and now it's been removed. And this is just like the box art, which is that when the box art came out, everyone's like, hey, why doesn't it say only on PlayStation? Because the game initially, when it was announced, it was going to be on PlayStation 4 first and come to PC at a later date. I mean, that's what the spokesperson said. Of course, things change over time, and possibly the deal could have changed, but it seems clearly abundant that this game is not staying on PlayStation 4 long term, not even PlayStation 5. It will probably come to PC just as they said they would. I mean, you gotta understand, this is what Sony's been doing lately, and for the past 4 or 5 years, they've been experimenting with releasing their owned properties on PC. And that's the thing, is that Death Stranding is an owned IP of Sony Interactive Entertainment, but it's still not outside the norm. The last 4 or 5 years, a lot of PSN games were allowed to go over. I think that was them, you know, testing the waters a little bit to see if it makes sense. And now the big recent thing is that they're letting the Quantic Dream games go over, and those are Sony properties. Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, Detroit Become Human, you know, these are not small games, mind you, and so I think this is Sony really taking this bigger step of saying, hey, let's let some of these bigger marquee titles in the PlayStation lineup go to PC and see, you know, if it makes a lot of sense for us. And also keep in mind, they're being released on the Epic Game Store, and I know that's very, very divisive with a lot of people right now, which is that Epic is doling out major cash to get exclusives onto their storefront, and so that is also entirely possible that as a joint effort between, say, Sony, Epic, and of course Quantic, because, you know, Quantic still has a vested interest in those games. That's how you see those games get released on the Epic Game Store. And so when Death Stranding eventually comes to PC after, let's say, a year, I mean, yeah, it might come to PC as an Epic Game Store exclusive. It's not outside the realms of impossibility. In fact, I would almost venture to say that this game is going to be penned as a multi-release on PC and PS5, you know, possibly exactly 1 year out or close to the PlayStation 5 launch. I'm sure Sony's got a plan already well in advance of what they're trying to figure out and what they're aiming to shoot for, and so that seems to make a whole lot of sense. But when it comes to the exclusivity thing, just like Microsoft did for such a long time over the 360 and Xbox One, which is that it's PR speak, you have to skirt around these issues. You can't just say straight up, oh yeah, the contract is 1 year and it will come to PC. You know, they can say indirectly at one point or another, yes, it's currently console exclusive, but that's about it. You know, they're very purposeful with their wordings. They're very purposeful with listings on websites or the box art. That's just the way it is. So I know it creates so much conversation, but it's easy to pick up what they're laying down. So this next one is rather odd, or maybe weird's the better way to put it, but the ChinaJoy event, this was last week or maybe the week before that we discussed this. Sorry, the timeline is so bad in my head, but this was the event where Sony held a 2-hour press conference showcasing a bunch of smaller scale games out of their China Hero initiative, which is them trying to get smaller scale Chinese developers on PlayStation. They showcased a number of games, cool stuff, and that was kind of it. Not so. One of the games in there, Genshin Impact, heavily inspired by Breath of the Wild, pretty much very unabashedly looks just like Breath of the Wild. It's got a very unique, distinct art style, so you can see it a mile away. Now, of course, it's a different game, but no doubt it looks like Zelda. And so a lot of, I guess, fans at the ChinaJoy event did not like this. A huge sign of protest. One guy actually, at some point, must have went home, brought back his PlayStation 4, his Pro model, mind you, and smashed it on the show floor. Not just an isolated event either. A number of people were so unhappy with this. They were throwing up the finger. They were, bringing copies of Breath of the Wild and just kind of like upset that this game just looks so much like Breath of the Wild. And even online, I guess on Chinese forums and comments, you've got a lot of Chinese gamers saying, this is just too far. It looks too similar. It's disrespectful, this and that. Now, the thing is, I can see where a lot of this is coming from. You initially look at this and go, this is ridiculous, these people are acting crazy. But I can see how a lot of, I guess, the part of that culture and a lot of Chinese gamers, they want more integrity when it comes to their image. A lot of Chinese companies, well, they copy things left and right. That's kind of like the big deal, right? Is that anytime there's any sort of invention and a patent's up, you've got, Chinese makers making whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter what it is. It could be any product from any category, from any industry. And it's like the same thing here with games, which is that it seems somewhat damaging. And I would assume that's really part of the culture, which is that you should be ashamed to be doing something like that. And I guess they're trying to, it's just one of those things where they want to be more accountable for not, copying so much, right? There's a difference between being inspired by something and then just straight up copying the entire environment and the mechanics and this and that to the point where it's pretty much the same game, except it's not on PlayStation 4. Now, whether something like Nintendo wants to send a cease and desist or get a legal battle started is probably beyond this little scenario. Probably nothing's going to happen. This game is probably going to come to PS4, and that's that. What's really weird, though, is a guy bringing his PS4 and smashing it on the ground. That's where it's just like, okay, dude, we don't have to do that now. I mean, ironically, all that really did was give this game some attention, because if you go to the trailer on PlayStation's YouTube channel for this game, now there's a bunch of comments saying, oh, cool, I would have never seen this if that guy didn't smash his PS4. So really, this guy did these developers a favor, and I'm sure that's going to work out nicely for them because they got way more attention than they would have otherwise before. So here's a topic we don't get to discuss too much here on this channel, which is loot boxes. This past week, the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association, which is the organization that represents the games industry, recently announced that a new policy will hopefully be put in place and implemented near the end of 2020, which will require not just Sony, but also Microsoft, Nintendo, and major publishers to disclose the odds on loot box purchases. So inherently, a loot box is something you buy online and you get digital goods in return, but it's randomized to a certain tiered list of rarity and commonality, and you don't know what you're going to get, which has really stirred up the conversation of, is loot boxes considered gambling? Is it consumer friendly, or is it, very predatory? Does it, prey on people that are willing to put in boatloads of cash? And that's why other countries and government bodies have really been getting involved in trying to regulate this to make it not necessarily, I guess, more consumer friendly, but more transparent with the consumer in terms of what you're possibly getting involved in if you were to purchase your typical loot box. And that's the thing, is we haven't really been able to keep up with this narrative because we don't talk about this too much on this channel, but the thing is, it's certainly a conflict of interest for big publishers that want to release these loot boxes because they are such a driving force for revenue. But to that same effect, I'm sure there's a lot of data out there that kind of says there's maybe a 1 to 2% of consumers that are really generating like 90% of the revenue for these loot boxes, but that is the point, which is that you're preying on these people to make boatloads of money, and it's based on odds. And the thing is, if you make it transparent, if you let people know the odds of items, it can be skewed in a number of different directions. So I don't think this is really a battle that we're over just yet. It's a step in the right direction, but I think there's still possibly more hurdles that could come at the end of 2020 when this is implemented. So let's say you go to the PlayStation Store, and in that little box is where you'd probably get your listing for the odds of whatever items are in the loot box, right? The thing is, what's discretionary here? What does the developer and publisher actually have to tell you? Which is that, let's say the game, for example, has an item rank of common, rare, ultra rare, but within each set of those categories, there's common, rare, ultra rare within the common section, within the uncommon section, within the rare section. What do they have to display? Is it each particular item they have to disclose? It's a 1 in 600 chance, a 1 in 3,000 chance, or can they just say, look, you're gonna get a 1 in 3 chance of common, a 1 in 5 chance of uncommon, a 1 in 10 chance of rare? You know what I mean? And really, you're gunning for something that's rare within rare, which would give you the odds of, say, 1 in 3,000. All theoretical numbers, of course. We don't know because they're not disclosed to us yet. But this is where it could go, right? Which is that you get this small wall, and there's another wall beyond that is still enticing more and more consumers to think, oh, the rare section is 1 in 10. Not bad. I have a 1 in 10 shot at a 99-cent loot box, or maybe even a $5 loot box, that I'll get a rare pull. But you're really looking for a rare item in that rare pull, which is really a 1 in 3,000. Now you've got a consumer that's putting in all this money. You know what I mean? Like, that's where it could get even worse. And so I'm not really sure where we could go beyond this, which is that it is a good thing, but it's still a thing where this could get way worse. I mean, I think it goes without saying, but if there is a loophole that publishers can exploit beyond this, they're probably going to do it, and that's where we have another issue. Now, we have to talk about this, and I'm sure many of you have seen already, but there were recently 2 mass shootings in the United States, once again, which is sad and ridiculous, but one of the things that came out of that was the new political agenda of violent video games are causing these issues, and they need to be dealt with, which is the typical BS coming out of our political parties. It's extremely annoying. It's deflecting the issue. But the thing that recently broke out, and this is very fresh news, which is that there are reports going around that the retailer Walmart is taking off marketing for violent games. So they're not stopping the sale of violent games, but rather posters, imagery, things that are displaying these games. They're taking that stuff down and not necessarily promoting that kind of material. And I guess the memo was being sent to employees saying, take away all the violent marketing and whatnot. If I believe the internal memo is saying it's in response to the shootings. I'm not entirely sure, so don't quote me on that. These are very early reports as I'm recording this Thursday night going into Friday morning, so keep that in mind. The point is the video game thing, right? Which is that it's just so ridiculous that we keep circling around this issue and trying to throw it on video games. I mean, it goes. You wish it would go without saying. The problem is that a lot of these older politicians are not only they have a vested interest in protecting the parties that are donating to them and the companies that are donating to them, but rather they just don't have a sound argument, and some of them just genuinely don't even realize that games don't actually do any of that stuff, right? They just see a violent game and think that, oh, that's a bad influence on a child, when really games are a multi-billion-dollar industry. They still make way more money than like music and movies and television. Games are loved and widely accepted around the world at this point. I mean, games are way much more impactful and meaningful to people of all ages and all creeds and nations. I mean, everybody plays games, and it's so well loved and revered. It's just like one of the common things I think a lot of humans are having nowadays with each other, which is that we all play games, whether it's on a smartphone or a console or a PC. We all enjoy games. Great time killers. They take us to another world. And just on that merit alone, that so many goddamn people play video games, seems quite obvious that it doesn't incite violence or violent behavior. Now, if anything, that's almost a numbers game at this point. It's almost surprising that you don't have a linkage at this point to 1 or 2 or 3 small little instances out of, upwards of 1 billion people playing games on this planet. You're telling me you can't find one actual extremely direct link? Yeah, you've got situations where I believe the Columbine shooters were into violent games, and some of the recent shooters as well, they certainly play video games, but it's one of those things where it's like, who doesn't play video games at this point? You're a young kid, you play video games. You're a young kid, you listen to music, you listen to movies. You can't necessarily link that to the actual desire to go out and harm another human being, right? That's where it gets ridiculous. The actual issues are these kids' mental states, the family situation that they're in, their availability to easily go out and buy weaponry. I mean, it's a myriad of different issues, but to say that it's something like pop culture, which that's what games are at this point, they're just part of everyday living in society. That's what it is. You can't, it's just ridiculous, So the ESA has responded saying, we're against the Trump administration's call for violent games to be taken action against and things like that. The ESA is obviously going to try and do their best to defend the industry. There's nothing else to really say other than it sucks. People need to be really vocal about this, though. I guess that's the underlying thing, is that people need to really start pushing hard to not only deflect away from the games issue, but to really sort of center in on what needs to be done to make this not so bad of an issue in the future, which is so sick to say regarding the United States, but that's one of the dire, unfortunate situations we're in. Moving on to our next news story, one developer from Studio Novorama, Ricardo Seligman, was discussing with Gaming Bolt about the PS5's SSD inclusion, and he was discussing how the SSD will make game loading less annoying. And so he was quoted as saying, regarding SSDs, they will quickly load content, making load screens less annoying and allowing us to load more enemies, particle effects, and environments on the fly without compromising the performance. And going on to say, you'll get more diverse and interesting video game worlds. Kind of really unsurprising words. If anything, I just like that more developers are open talking about next-gen hardware and what the inclusion of the SSD will do for a lot of their games. And that's, what we've been discussing. You're going to get more diverse worlds. You're certainly going to see less load times. You would hope no load times. But you can see different scenarios where developers can really apply it into a number of different aspects of their games, right? So it may be a situation where one developer want to go crazy with creating a really vast open world and you don't have any of this texture pop in or things like that. Or you could have a more isolated linear game that really focuses on these hyper-realistic texture details against the walls, the pavement, the enemies, of course, hair. You can put, the ray tracing in there for all these complex lighting environments and really create something really beautiful there. With the particle effects too, or you could just have a situation where you could have a lot of these separate moving parts in a game that make it feel much more destructible. There's so many things that you can do, and just another developer saying that that's certainly what you're going to see on next-gen hardware. But now I think it's time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you could win a $10 PSN code, and I'd like to congratulate Big Boss. You have won a $10 code. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. We do this every single week on Let's Talk PlayStation. Follow that link down below. Supporting this channel in a number of ways can gain you an entry. The winner will be announced next week, as always. Those are all the news stories I want to talk about with you guys from this past week, and so Monday's video was an EA Access review, and I know many of you don't want to give a dime to EA, but if you give them $5, in all fairness, not a bad deal, so go check that out. And then also, we've been doing this running string of videos where it's like the coolest and rarest consoles. Well, Wednesday was the coolest and rarest PlayStations, and so watch that as well. Very cool stuff in there. If you are a collector, there are some PlayStations in there you're going to want to get your hands on for sure. Now, Monday's upcoming video, you're going to definitely want to see this. Very interesting stuff for sure. I think a lot of you are really going to enjoy this. If you remember when I did the PSN ID name change video, and I changed my PSN ID to test a bunch of old PS3 and Vita games and see how they responded to it. Black Ops 2 would freeze. and then I corrupted the hard drive of my PS3, and that was my main hard drive with 10 years of content and photos, videos, game saves, all that. In that video, I said I don't have time to fix this. We'll do that later because I was doing the name change video, but that later is now. And so coming up on Monday, I'm going to show you the process of trying to save the hard drive of your PlayStation 3 beyond what the PS3 can do, because really that's the whole point, is that the PS3 can't do much. It just tries to format the hard drive. There is a way to save that data, and I'm going to show you hopefully how to do it. I haven't filmed it yet. I don't necessarily know if I'll succeed. Whether I succeed or fail in the recovery process, I'm going to film it and show you. So hopefully it works out, and Monday I think is going to be interesting for sure. I really hope it's not a failure. But that's coming Monday. And then Wednesday, I don't know what I'm going to do, but stick around. It'll probably be pretty cool. That's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.